Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mulberry Talent Partners Career Conversation. I'm just going to give everybody a few moments to log on. Okay, it looks like everyone is successfully logging on. So again, welcome to Mulberry Talent Partners Career Conversation. My name is Kelsey Triff, and I am the Talent Acquisition Specialist here at Mulberry. So a little bit more about Mulberry. We are a full-service recruiting and staffing agency headquartered in Portland, Oregon, with an office in the Silicon Valley. We specialize in the professional placements of human resources, professional and financial office, payroll and operations positions with direct hire, temp to hire, and temporary opportunities. I would encourage you to check out our website at mulberrytalent.com to see our previously recorded conversations, our upcoming conversations, and check out our job opportunities that we update on a very regular basis. So jumping into introductions, we are joined today by Lauren Francis and Kea Meyers Duggan. Lauren is our fabulous founder and president here at Mulberry. She started Mulberry back in June of 2017 and comes with over 25 years of talent acquisition experience. We're also joined by Kea Meyers Duggan. She is an award-winning entrepreneur and recognized coach and speaker on overcoming fear in order to make a career pivot. She has worked with hundreds of driven professionals globally to help them manage their fears and stop doing things they hate by breaking down their vision into realistic steps they can take immediately. So today they will be talking about the clarity on the two types of career pivots, the most common reason people end up in the same situation they left and how to avoid that pitfall, and steps you can take today to start laying the groundwork for your own pivot. And we'd like today to be super interactive, so do not shy away from using the Q&A function on Zoom, and we'll try to get to any and all questions that come in. And we've planned for 30 minutes today, but if questions keep coming in, we'll allow for a few extra moments, so we hope that you can stick with us. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it off to Lauren and Kea.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Kea, welcome to
Thank you.
Conversations. It's so nice to have you. You know, I had the pleasure of listening to Kea address a group. And then, of course, I chased her down. And here she is. So I wanted very much to introduce all of you to Kea. She is an inspiration. She has a tremendous, she has so much to share with everyone. And the career pivot idea is just so important for people to take the opportunity to look at their backgrounds and look at their careers and make changes if that's what they want to do. And so, Kea, let's jump right into it.
Let's do it. And I'm glad that you did chase me down. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, great. Well, it's good to have you. So, first of all, I wanted to talk a little, well, I know that there were three different areas that we were going to capture for our viewers today. One was their clarity this is what we hope to articulate. Clarity on two types of career pivots. So we can talk about that. And the most common reason people end up in the same situation that they left and how to avoid that. And then steps you can take today to start laying the groundwork for a pivot. And it is a step-by-step process. I know when we talked about this conversation, it's not something you just, you shift one day you're in another space.
Right.
So tell us about, what are the types of pivots that people typically make? Let's start there.
Yeah, and I think when people think about making a career pivot of some sort, and I like to add that little caveat because sometimes the career pivot is it's a sidestep, which is a lane change pivot, as I like to describe it, where you're not doing a wholesale career shift. You're not throwing out your lane that you've been in with the bathwater. You're shifting to do something similar. So because this is my background of marketing, it's, for instance, going from being a marketing director or being in the marketing industry to shifting into PR or communication. So it's something similar where there are a lot of great similarities, a lot of important transferable skills, in terms of client service, but it is a slight shift. The other type of pivot, which is a bigger pivot, and I really call it a highway pivot, where there's usually transferable skills, but it's a bigger shift. Like you're maybe going from being a teacher to being a PR consultant or something like that. But it is where you are doing more of a 180. But I like to break it down because sometimes people think, or when they hear career pivot or career change, they think it is this wholesale swap, and that's not always the case.
Right. And when in making that pivot too, especially when it's a highway pivot, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to think about how you're going to present yourself on a resume and how your transferable skills are, are what am I trying to say? The transferable skills are valid. And then of course, how do you start to get that experience? So it's very interesting. So what are the most common questions people have about changing their career path?
The biggest questions that I hear are, one, how do I do it? Right. To your point of it's not just this one day you wake up and you're starting to apply for a job in a completely different industry or completely different, type of role or functionality. So it's the how, the very tactical steps of what do I do first, or what are maybe a consortium of steps, right? Like what are the first 3 things that I should consider doing or thinking about? So the how, but then also, what do I do? I know that where I am right now isn't working for me. I know that I don't enjoy that as much as I used to. So how do I figure out what's next? And those are really the 2 things that people get tripped up on. And then, kind of the subsets of those questions are, well, what do I do if it doesn't work out? I think people often, and this isn't just with career changes, right? It's any kind of shift that you are thinking of making in your life. For some reason, our brains, and maybe this is the way that our brains have been functioning since, cave person times, but when you're thinking of making some kind of change, there is this shift in our brains where we feel like we can't go back, like we can't undo the decision that we made. And so that fear of I can't go back, I can't change my mind, is something that really holds people back and becomes a big question for individuals. And I see that Kelsey came back. Does that mean we have a question?
We have a relevant question. So somebody who said, I'm so late in my career, is it possible to do big shifts at my age?
Yes. Without knowing anything that you've done, and I'm going to share a story, and a really good friend of mine shared this with me. A relative of hers, I can't remember if it was an aunt, but that doesn't matter. A relative of hers had gotten into her 60s or 70s, and decided that she wanted to become a chef. She wanted to go back to culinary school. She went back to culinary school and is now a chef and is loving it in her 70s. So it is never, ever, ever too late to go in a new direction. Just from my own personal experience in my family, my mom, her whole career, she was spent doing kind of community relations work, and she decided that she was going to go into full-blown politics, and she became a state rep in her 60s. So it's never too late to make a change. But the thing that people have to decide is, are you willing to put the energy and the work into this shift that it's going to require? Like Lauren and I were saying, it's not like you just wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to do this. It's, are you willing to put in the energy that kind of change, whatever it is, requires? But it's never too late, bottom line.
And you did it successfully. And and I started Mulberry in my 50s. So, I think what happens sometimes when people go into their own business, that wanting to uncover and all of the different areas they might be faced with, and so really, one of the things that I've seen that I think is most helpful, and that's where we refer people to you, is that I think a lot of people tend to underestimate how much talking about what they're trying to do, articulating it, and also having somebody that's not, friends and family are great, but having someone like yourself or others, mentors, and those kinds of people that really can help you flush out all of the areas that you're needing to explore.
Right. Well, and Lauren, I want to build on that because there is, and I know you and I have talked about this, one of the things that, and it's a step that I invite people to do because people underestimate it. They don't want to sound needy, but after people have some semblance of what it is they want to do, you don't have to know exactly. You can just have you can know the suburb of the career pivot that you want to make. But I always invite people to tell every and anyone that is, that they can trust with that information, right? Because there is inevitably someone who knows someone who's doing what you're doing or what you want to do, or they can refer you to someone who is thinking of something similar. I think of, I was leading a workshop a couple of months ago, and we were talking about secret ambitions, right? We were talking about things that's like, if I knew it would work out, I would do ... And someone had said that they have been dreaming of being a voiceover artist. I kid you not, wow. Someone in that room, they do not work with them. They only met them in that workshop. Someone in that meeting, in that workshop said, oh, a friend of mine is doing voiceover work. I'd be happy to connect you. Just from her being willing to say in that space that she wanted to do that with her career. So there is great benefit in letting people know what it is that you're thinking of doing.
Right. And having I think a lot, how much does fear play into pivots or changes?
Huge. I would say the number one reason why people don't take action on it.
So
number one reason.
So it paralyzes people, and they
paralyzing.
They dismiss in their minds. I think the other thing too, the articulating and getting it out there and getting it out of your own head is so important, because I always tell people you can't do this alone. You need support, you need mentors, you need the people around you to help you work through all, right. Because it's not, like you said, you don't wake up one day and it is something you've been thinking about. So it's got to be uncovered. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, and the fear, there's so many different types of fear that play into this. Fear of, what if I fail at this? Fear of, what are people going to say, especially if you've been in a career for so many years, right? So it's like, am I too old to do this? Am I too far down the path? What happens if I start over? Fear of losing status, right? Fear of, you've reached a certain stage in your career, and it's like, what are people going to say about me taking this huge step back to square one? And how am I going to feel about it? Right. Like that's another reason why people don't move forward, is they're really hesitant about the feeling or the experience that they're going to have when they make it, of all the things that you're going to have to figure out, right? Of all the, to your point, all the support that you're going to need to make this happen. But those are really like all the levels, or some of the levels of fear that people have that keep them from even exploring what a pivot might look like.
Right. And that's so tragic, but I think that so many of us have that same challenge, and imposter syndrome does show up here as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Feeling just, I can't. And, you know, I think the other thing too, is that failure is, I mean, I don't know, you know, we all want to succeed, and we all have this idea of what success looks like for us. And, and it's really risky, and it's scary to make a change. But the other thing is, you have to look at your life, and I think I think one of the blessings of COVID is people are really, I'm seeing more of the pivot and people making changes right now and saying, you know, I really am not happy in my career. It's affecting my life. And so it affects everything. And so, and again, the baby steps. You know, what are the baby steps that people take? I mean, we've talked about seeking out someone like yourself. Tell us more about that, because sometimes the idea, and then, you know, where do I start? Right.
Well, you know, the first thing, and this is, so I'm like preempting the steps that you can take today, but, you know, the one thing that I ask, or the one place where I ask people to start as part of this baby step, right? You're not even exploring what's next, is really tuning into and naming what's happening right now. What is it that you are trying? What is it that you want to leave? Not even trying, right? Like, you're not doing anything other than this exploration of what is it that you want to leave and why? Because that's a big step that people skip over. You know, there was an article, I think it came out last week, called The Great Resignation, right? About how so many people have just been holding on to their plans to leave because of the uncertainty of COVID, right? But when that urgency to get out outweighs what it is that you're trying to leave, that's often what causes you to recreate what you're leaving. So it's getting clear on what it is that is, you know, painful, what is stressful, what's overwhelming, what don't you like, and why don't you like it? Why is it overwhelming? Why is it stressful? When you can tune into that, because so often we're just, you know, we're pushing forward. We're always pushing forward, and very rarely do we take time to assess, like, why was this successful? Like, what did I do that made this successful? And just patting our own selves on the back. But tuning into what hurts and why is the first step to making your career pivot, whatever that is, a little bit more successful. So that's really the first step. And then, you know, thinking about, and this is especially for the people who know that they want to make a shift but don't know exactly what it is, tune into what your energy givers are. So, for instance, what do you love that people ask you about? When people ask you for help with something, what is it that you love to help people with? Really being able to name the things that give you joy in the work that you're doing right now is so important. The biggest thing that I hear from people is that they don't know what they're good at. They don't know what their zones of brilliance are, which is the combination of things that you're really good at and things that you really enjoy doing. There are tons of things that I'm good at that I'm like, don't ask me for help with that. I don't want to touch it. But I know I'm really good at it. But when you can do that kind of tune up too, that can help give you a little glimpse into what might be next. So yeah, just thinking about, what do I like to help people with? What do I love to talk about? What do I like when people ask me to speak about this or talk about this or consult on it, whatever it is. So those are just a few things that that are really key. And then, you know, the last kind of baby step, again, before you've even done any of the research into what could be next, is name what your target is. And I'm not even saying to know what the role is that you want to do, but how do you want to feel that you don't feel right now? When you wake up in the morning, what are the things that you might be able to touch that you're not touching right now? So what's the experience that you want to have? How do you want to feel as you go through your days about the things that you're working on, or the types of people that you're working with, or the type of company or environment that you're in? Just, do some uncovering of what that landing zone looks like for you. These can be great insights that help to open the door for what's next. And then that gives you something to talk about with people. I'm really looking for a role that allows me to do this, and I can work with these types of people. Then that opens up the doors of possibility and conversation for what might work out for you.
Right. Yeah, because I think sometimes people look really narrowly, or they get in a situation where they're so unhappy that, and they don't give themselves a space to think about joy, because it's hard to think about you're not in a good place. It's hard with positive feelings when you're feeling so negative. And what ends up happening a lot is that's where people get stuck and end up in the same, what you mentioned earlier, about ending up in the same situation they left, because they might leave it for the same, so they think changing jobs is going to make the difference. Sometimes it does, and there's no question about that. But that often happens where it just continues to repeat itself. I see Kelsey back on the screen.
Okay, so we have a relevant question. How do you revive your career passion when upper management is not supportive or positive?
Well, that is when the introspection work is going to be critical. If you're not, and I see someone that says leave, yes, but before you do that, really get clear on, so speaking of management, so that can be part of that experience that you want to create, right? So what's not working for you with the management that you have right now? What does the opposite of that look like? And just knowing that you are doing the intentional work to frame up what could be next could be the exciting thing that revives you while you're trying to figure out what's next. When I was making my very first pivot, that was a thing that gave me energy to show up at my current job every day, was knowing that I was working on, thinking about, brainstorming about what could be next. That made it a little easier to show up and to, muster up some energy where I was until I could get to where I was going. So again, doing that introspection work and a little bit of visioning to what would the ideal scenario be for me. And that is going to be one thing that's going to give you a little bit of an edge, just so you can keep showing up while you work on what's next.
Yeah, it's true. I think make the most of the situation that you're in, because you don't want to be in a situation where it just gets so damaging, and then you start to not show up well. You're not right. You're not your best self, and you're not right under those conditions anyway, and you know that. So again, I think going back to set a goal. Take the time while you're on the job to figure out what your next step's going to be. And again, it's so important to have conversations and to open up ideas and to explore things and listen to others. I coach candidates all the time on this. The other thing is that, one of the things when you're looking, let's say it's a job situation, you want to leave one organization for another, or it's a career pivot. So those can be hand in hand. But I think too, people want to say, you want to feel good about positioning, how you're going to position your departure. Oh my, so, and that's how you step into the next thing. So keep that in mind when you're in that situation.
Yeah. And Lauren, I just want to emphasize a little bit your talk about the conversation compared to, or combined with what I was saying about you don't have to know exactly what it is you want to go to. When I was making my most recent pivot, I was in a role and there were a few things that I was really getting energy from. I knew that I loved doing it, and I saw a friend who was making a pivot into coaching. And so I just knew that I wanted to start shifting away from what I was doing, but I wasn't exactly sure if coaching was it. I was just curious. I invited her to a coffee. I was asking her about what she was doing, and then she asked what I was doing and why I was thinking of leaving, why I was wanting to have the conversation. And I told her, well, here are the things that I'm doing that I really enjoy. And she was like, girl, that's coaching, right? And it wasn't like official life coaching, but I was being a speaker coach. But because I was able to zero in on what was giving me energy in that job that overall was kind of dragging me down, and then taking that into a conversation where I didn't really know what the outcome of the conversation was going to be. I was just trying to learn about what someone else was doing, and that opened the door to me pivoting into coaching. But that wasn't exactly what I was thinking going into it. But by knowing what was giving me energy and then having the courage to have a conversation with someone to say, I'm not really sure that I want to stay where I am, that set me on a completely different trajectory. So really plussing up on the having conversations.
Indeed. It is so important to open it all up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know that too, that, I made it. I sometimes it's an exploration where I sold my last company that I started in Silicon Valley. And then, and then I was sort of adrift for many years. Thank goodness I have a very supportive husband who allowed me to kind of float around and figure out what I was doing. But I had a couple of missteps, and, it helped me know what I didn't want. And I don't necessarily want, what you don't want. And sometimes you find that by doing it. Sometimes you just know some of the things you're talking about in terms of preparing. I definitely don't want to do this. And sometimes we don't know ourselves well enough. And and I think too, everybody's so afraid to fail. Well, sometimes and failure, the word is not positive, and maybe we could use a different word, but sometimes.
Well, and the only way that it's failure is if you stay down. If you have gotten, and my husband, who is, he's a martial artist, and he was like, you have to know how to take a fall in Kung Fu. When you're bracing yourself against the fall, you hurt yourself more. But if you just kind of flow with it, it makes it easier. And I like to use that same analogy in making any kind of career change is take the hit. If you are so focused on this isn't going to work out, and then what happens when it doesn't work out, you're not going to be open to learning. And that's all failure is. And I think someone put an acronym in there. It popped up, but failure is an opportunity to learn. Right. But it's only a bona fide failure if you stay down. If you're just like, well, that's it, I'm throwing in the towel, that's failure. But failure is data. It's an opportunity for you to take what didn't work, see what you could have done differently, and use that to redirect.
Absolutely. That is so helpful.
Yeah. Rosa put in our chat, first attempt in learning equals fail.
Yeah. Yes, Rosa, thank you. Awesome.
Well, we have several other questions that have come in as well. So this one is a little longer. It says, I've increasingly noticed that today's marketplace undervalues the kinds of transferable skills that are so important to today's complex world, but overvalues experience with specific software, technology, programs, etc. Stuff that can be taught and learned relatively easily. I'm discouraged by the check boxes kind of approach to hiring people right now that makes it much harder to pivot. Any suggestions or insights? I always thought I could sell people on how to connect the dots between what I've done and what I want to do. But maybe the issue is that the people doing the hiring don't have an understanding of how important some of our long-term experience is. Or is it ageism?
Wow,
Mm.
that is so big and so right on.
Yes. Yes. So first, I will say that sounds more like a systemic issue at, you know, across the board, because there are, and again, kind of my own experiences, there are companies that do realize that the hard skills like software and things of that nature can be learned, but there are transferable skills that cannot be taught, right? Like, you're either a good communicator or you're not. You're a good team player or you're not. You're empathetic or you're not. These are not things that you can learn. And so I think my only guidance there, without this, you know, becoming another like an hour webinar, but I think my only guidance there is to, as much as you can, bypass the 20th century way of applying, which is applying online, and try to backdoor it with someone who's on the inside, who knows you, who knows your ability to ramp up quickly with things that, you know, you can learn from taking a certification course, right? But backdoor it by really selling your package of, these are my skills. This is my zone of brilliance. This is why you guys need me on your team. And I can learn this stuff quickly, right? Like, I'll do it on my own dime, right? Like, there are ways that you can sell it, but I like to emphasize finding someone on the inside who can say, listen, I know that we want someone with these skills, but we need this type of person in here. We can deal with the hard learning later, but we need someone like this inside now.
Yeah, I agree that it's a systemic problem. And I think that alone is an issue.
Yeah.
There are career coaches, and of course, you know, we always coach our candidates and want to help them get from where they are to where they want to be. And so helping to flesh out those transferable skills and to be able to communicate that in a cover letter or so on. And once we get to know the candidates, we're able to also showcase them that way as well. So you need an advocate. You need someone from the inside, like you were saying, Kea, or, you know, and a career coach or someone like us to help you go to get to where you want to go. So completely see. I think the challenge with companies is they see people very narrowly in many cases.
Yeah.
You're not looking at the broader opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, next question. Rima says, do you have any suggestions for how to right a ship once it's already too late and you blew off your career? Stayed too long until I just had to jump. Now I'm taking jobs to basically survive.
So thank you for that question. And this goes to what we were saying with one of the first questions that came through is, no matter your feeling of I've wasted time, too much time, I'm too far down the path, it is not too late. And I want to honor and acknowledge that we all have bills to pay. We all have to have food on the table, roof over our head, lights on, right? So I love this Oprah quote of, do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. So if you have to take right now jobs just to bridge the gap while you're building skills, or while you're making the right connections, or while you're just getting clarity on what it is that you want to do, there's no shame in that. None, right? And if you you can work with a mentor or a coach to help you phrase that when you are ready to start interviewing and, applying for jobs. There's always a way to give voice to why your path has had the turns that it's had, but it is not too late. It's just deciding within yourself that you can make this shift, and then getting clarity and start taking those little baby steps to get closer to the vision that you have for yourself now. But it's not too late. That nothing is a waste ever, unless you let it be a waste. That's
okay. Next question. What tips do you have on having great informational interviews?
Ooh, one of my favorite questions. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but one, just having a teensy bit of clarity on what it is that you want to do. Then two, being clear of what you want to walk away with from that informational interview, right? Don't set up an informational interview and just say, hey, I want to have coffee. Like, give that person a reason to say yes. And usually it's an ego stroke. It's a, hey, you have some experience that is really inspiring to me. I would love to, invite you to a 15-minute virtual coffee to talk a little bit about this, but know on the back end what you want to walk away with. And it's not a job, it's information. It's what do you need to know from that informational interview that's going to help you get a little closer or be a little bit more dangerous in what it is that you're thinking of doing next. So have an objective for the informational interview so that you can formulate your questions or guide the conversation accordingly.
Perfect. Well, great. It looks like that's the end of the questions that came in. So thank you both.
Great questions.
I had a question for Kea before we leave. What's next? What's coming up next for you in your practice that you can share with the audience?
Oh, yes. A couple things, but the one that is ready for public sharing is that I am going to begin hosting monthly masterclasses. I haven't published the schedule just as of yet, but I'm most likely going to start them in June, probably closer to the end of the month. But yeah, I will be starting monthly masterclasses.
And who should sign up for those?
Well, I'm going to cover a gambit of sessions or topics. So my best guidance is certainly someone who is thinking of making a career change, someone who is feeling like they're too far down the road or have made too many bad decisions to turn back, common theme today. But then also just someone who is wanting to get grounded to set themselves up for success, and especially coming out of this period of languishing and uncertainty, elevated uncertainty, I think is the best way to describe it. These master classes would be for you.
Are they expensive?
No, I am going to cap it somewhere in the $10 to $15 per class range.
It sounds incredible. Well, how can people reach
you?
What is the best way for people to reach you?
People can reach me by joining my mailing list, going to my website, KeaMeyersDuggan.com, or you can just shoot me an email, and I'll make sure that you guys have my contact information.
That's fantastic. We'll also share it with our candidates as well.
Wonderful.
Sounds just terrific, and
thank you.
So grateful that you're opening it up to so many people, and also the price is so affordable. And I imagine that people are going to get a lot out of it. So we really appreciate you sharing that. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, thank you, Lauren and Kea. Just a few more things. We have a couple upcoming conversations. We're going to be doing another resume makeover pop-up in June. Date is TBD, so make sure to be on the lookout. And then we will also be joined by Julie Kearney on June 15th to talk about employee engagement and why it matters. And then here are a few ways to stay in touch with us. So feel free to check out Mulberry Talent's website, connect with us on LinkedIn. We have Lauren's email, and we'll include Kea's contact information as well in the recording email that'll go out. So Thank you all for choosing to fly with Mulberry. We know that you have several options when it comes to webinars, and we're so happy that you joined us. And thank you so much, Lauren and Kea. This was amazing.
Oh, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the great questions. And it was a pleasure having you on. You're an inspiration and it just, and a great help to so many. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. This is what I love to do.
Yeah, we can tell. Well, everyone, until next time, have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.